I was desperate for an escape hatch. At the time, I was living in New York, trapped in a soul-crushing job that I hated. When I managed to land 2 interviews for corporate office positions in North Carolina, complete with great salaries, actual benefits, and the promise of better weather, it felt like a lifeline. The interviews were scheduled for a Friday. Because I couldn't afford to miss work on Thursday, and because I was trying to save money by driving instead of flying, my plan was brutal. Work a full Thursday shift, head home to grab my suitcase, say a quick goodbye to my family, and immediately hit the road for an 8-hour drive. My estimated time of arrival at the Comfort Inn was 2 a.m. I started the trip strong, fueled by nerves and 3 cups of coffee. But eventually, reality catches up with you. I was already running on empty from a week of stress-induced insomnia, and no amount of caffeine can override pure physical exhaustion. By the time I had about 2 hours left in the drive, the highway was entirely empty, and my eyelids felt like lead. Then, I saw him. On the shoulder of the pitch-black highway, a man was standing perfectly still. He wasn't walking, hitchhiking, or looking for car trouble. He was just standing there, dressed in a sharp, formal suit. As my headlights swept over him, his head slowly turned, his eyes tracking my car as I sped past. "What the hell?" I muttered aloud. It was deeply bizarre. For a split second, I actually thought about pulling over to see if he was stranded, letting my mind run wild with explanations to keep myself awake. Maybe he'd been kicked out of a car after an argument? I used the mystery to force my brain to stay alert. But 10 minutes later, the air in my car turned ice cold. Ahead on the shoulder, another man in a suit was standing by the trees. My heart hammered against my ribs. Against all logic, I slowed the car down, pulling onto the shoulder to offer help. But as my tires crunched to a stop, I glanced in my rearview mirror, then turned around completely to look out the back window. The shoulder was empty. The man was gone. Terrified, I slammed my foot on the gas and tore back onto the highway. I was losing my mind. I needed to stop, get more coffee, and just survive the last hour and a half. I pulled into the first brightly lit rest area I could find. After purchasing a medium coffee, I sat in my parked car, trying to steady my breathing. That's when I looked out the side window. Underneath a buzzing yellow light post, the man in the suit was standing again. This time, I got a clear view. He was middle-aged, white, clean-shaven, with short, dark brown hair. His expression was entirely blank, but his body was angled directly toward my driver's side door. I didn't even take another sip of my coffee. I threw the car into drive and peeled out of the parking lot, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. By the time I left the highway, the fatigue was blinding. I was a hazard to myself and everyone else on the road. Knowing I wouldn't make it to the hotel, I pulled into a dark, empty commercial parking lot, reclined my seat all the way down, and tried to close my eyes. Even as exhausted as I was, terror kept me hovering on the edge of sleep. I was paralyzed by the fear that if I opened my eyes, I'd see him staring through the glass. I was just drifting off when a sudden, sickening jolt of adrenaline snapped me awake. My instincts screamed at me to look around. I scanned the darkness outside the driver's window, the front windshield, the passenger side. Nothing. Then I glanced up at the rearview mirror. My soul left my body. Reflected in the glass, sitting silently in my back seat, was a dark silhouette. I didn't look twice. I threw my door open, screamed at the top of my lungs, and scrambled backward out of the car, scraping my elbows on the asphalt. I kept screaming into the empty night until I finally gathered the courage to stand up and shine my phone light into the cabin. The back seat was completely empty. Panting, my chest heaving, a wave of cold relief washed over me. I was hallucinating. My brain was entirely fried, misinterpreting shadows because of extreme sleep deprivation and stress. There was no man in a suit. The sheer terror of the moment had pumped so much adrenaline into my system that sleep was no longer an option. I got back in, finished my lukewarm coffee, and white-knuckled the rest of the drive. I checked into the hotel, collapsed onto the bed, and blacked out. The next morning, I woke up feeling reasonably recharged. My first interview was at 11 a.m. I got dressed, practiced my speaking points, and walked into the corporate lobby, ready to secure my new life. The receptionist paged the hiring manager. A moment later, a door opened, and a man stepped out to greet me. I froze. My breath caught in my throat, and the blood drained from my face. The man walking toward me was middle-aged, clean-shaven with short, dark brown hair. He was wearing a sharp gray suit. He was the exact, identical image of the man I had hallucinated on the highway. The interviewer immediately noticed my reaction. It was written all over my face. I tried to recover, but the psychological shock of seeing my waking nightmare stand right in front of me completely derailed my confidence. I was nervous, stuttering, and entirely out of it for the rest of the meeting. I left the building knowing I had completely blown it. Thankfully, my second interview of the day was with a woman. With the shock wearing off, I nailed the presentation, got the job, and eventually relocated to North Carolina, where I still work today. Later, I talked to my therapist about that night. She offered a fascinating, logical explanation. The extreme pressure of the interviews, combined with severe sleep deprivation, had caused my brain to hallucinate a manifestation of my deepest anxiety. Subconsciously, I was terrified of the impending interviews, so my mind projected the literal archetype of what I feared, a corporate man in a suit, onto the dark highway. It makes perfect sense, and I want to believe it. But even now, whenever I have to drive down a dark, empty highway at night, I find myself checking the rearview mirror, terrified of what might be sitting in the back seat. Double tap if your chest just tightened. Share this with someone who loves scary stories, and hit that follow button right now so you never miss another midnight nightmare.